Well, I'm going to start off by introducing our panelists tonight. We have a great variety of from students, Roman as a student who just graduated, to folks who have been working in the industry for a while. So I think lots of variety of perspectives that will be super valuable. I'll start with Roman Boho. He's an engineering graduate from 2020, and he is currently CEO of Meta CTF, a cybersecurity training and recruiting company. Next, we have, I'm not going to be able to say it, Millie, help me out with your name.
Melike.
Melike. I was not.
You got Enrique, but it's Melike. So maybe next time you'll remember that.
Well, thanks so much. Sorry for being so terrible with your name. I'll practice on that for next time for sure. But she is leading security governance, risk, and compliance at a fintech company called EarnIn. We also have with us Aaron Hughes, who is Chief Information Security Officer at the second largest grocery chain, Albertson Companies. And also with us tonight is Crystal Rowe, who is the Senior Director of Cyber Analytics and Quality Assurance at Blue Voyant. So we're super excited to have them all with us tonight. Our moderators are Connie Zhang, a fourth-year computer science major, Chris Moroda, a second-year computer science major, and Chase Hildebrand, also a second-year computer science major. So again, thank you all for being here, and we're super excited to hear from our panelists tonight. And I think to just start things off, we'll have each of our panelists just give an overview of their career journey and where they started and how they got interested and involved in the cybersecurity industry. And I think we'll just go in the order that I introduced, and we'll start with Roman.
Sounds good. Good evening, everyone. Well, I think my career in cybersecurity is kind of interesting because it's not, I used to be very technical in high school and college, and then recently I've been, pretty much running a company, and I haven't really had that much time to do all this technical work. But I guess I can, still share the progress. So I first got into cybersecurity about 7 years ago, back when I was in high school. So my friend and I, Jake Smith, who also graduated in 2020, we used to have, so General Electric used to have their office right next to our high school. And every Friday they would come and, give talks, give presentations. They hosted a Capture the Flag competition that we participated in. And that's how, I got interested in cybersecurity. So we participated in Cyber Patriot, for all 4 years. And then when I went to UVA, I kind of already knew that I want to pursue cybersecurity as a career. While at UVA, Jake and I, we restarted the CNS club. We started the CCDC club, the CCDC team that we participated, and we went to nationals 3 times. While at UVA, I interned for G Digital. I also used to work for Black Hills Information Security. I used to help them with some of their penetration tests. But throughout this entire process, I was also working on a personal project that started back from, when I was in high school. After participating in some CTF competitions, my friend and I decided to run one ourselves. And so we held it at our high school. Then next year, a conference reached out to us. Then another conference reached out to us. And at some point, we started getting so much demand that we decided to, actually turn it from a volunteering project into something that we make into, a business. And so for the past 2 years, we've been incorporated. We've ran over 75 competitions, for a lot of different companies. We work with a lot of really cool organizations like, BHIS, Red Siege, Palantir. Next week, I get to travel to Canada to run a training there. So that's kind of my job right now. I still do a lot of, I still participate in a lot of competition myself, but right now I'm mostly in a position where I, try to grow a company and I do a lot of cybersecurity training. Yep.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, we'll go with you next.
Okay. So when I started my career, there wasn't a cybersecurity team, or even the term wasn't necessarily used really. So it was all IT, and my career really evolved into what it is based on like series of events that perhaps I think I stumbled into. But I'll tell you, I one thing I have done is like I was always curious. So I started my career with an internship opportunity that I was fortunate enough to have through the UVA Career Services, actually. And no, they did not pay me to say that. Um, and Francis, I don't know if you remember me, but I can never thank you enough for all your diligent and selfless efforts so that I can actually get an internship with UI. So thank
Oh,
you.
thank you very much. My pleasure. You're a joy to work with for
I know,
sure.
please, yeah, please don't tell the year because I'd like to remain looking, young at Zoom because it's awesome like this. So I started doing IT advisory consulting, and then I joined the same company, EY, as a consultant full time after I graduated. Um, then I became interested in data analytics because I got into some of the projects related to privacy, and I then joined Freddie Mac's data analytics and modeling team. My background is in computer engineering and systems engineering, but I really love connecting with people. I like understanding problems. And I was just amazed at all the things that data can actually show and do for us. And then a project that I worked on focused on technology risk and controls, and around data integrity, which led me join their enterprise risk management organization at the same company. And then I learned technology risk management concepts, technical controls. And when FHFA, the regulator of Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, mandated these government-supported entities to have one securitization platform, my next company was announced, which is Common Securitization Solutions. And it was a startup, which is, I definitely encourage you to check out one startup at least in your lifetime if you get the opportunity, because you learn so much. And it was a startup that was actually backed by the government, and it was a transform. It had and it still does transformational mission that changed the mortgage industry. So I was really lucky that I was asked to join to build their technology risk management function, and then implemented technical controls around security, infrastructure, identity and access management. So across the board, all the areas that, because it's a startup, they have nothing in place. So whenever there's a problem, you basically just go and try to solve it with people. And then I moved to the West Coast. I'm in San Francisco now, and I joined Symantec's cybersecurity team to architect their risk framework and improve their security posture. And then Symantec got acquired, and I moved to another fintech to oversee their security risk. It's another fintech, but this time it's actually serves for the consumer and has another great mission to change financial services and make things available for everybody. And I'm still learning, but so who knows where I'm going to be next? But my cybersecurity wasn't really traditional. I didn't wake up and say I wanted to work on security. It just happened that way.
All right. I think I'm up next here. Similar to Malika, it wasn't called cybersecurity when I first got into the industry. So I will date myself and say that I graduated from the university about 25 years ago. And in the stacks there was like Netscape 1.0 or 2.0, and everybody still had AOL instant messenger addresses and stuff. So I'm probably the gray beard of the panel here. I went to the university on an Air Force ROTC scholarship. So while I was keenly interested in computer science, the way ROTC scholarships worked back then is I had to choose my major, I think maybe my junior or senior year of high school. And like once you got to university, you couldn't change. So I was a mechanical engineering major, but I was drawn more to CS courses and programming throughout my 4 years at the university. I was actually going to be a pilot in the Air Force. So I was selected to go to pilot training and would have never had a career in cybersecurity. And this is where sort of I always, talk to students and folks about how you deal with adversity. I always thought I was going to be a pilot, went and sat in the back of F-16s during my summers from UVA. And then I come back to go get commissioned to be active duty Air Force officer. and I had really bad hearing loss in one ear, sort of never knew. Like growing up, we didn't have cell phones. I always just thought you were supposed to hold phone to your right ear. I could hear better. Left ear, I couldn't hear anybody. And I just thought that was normal. And so when I went to go do my flight physical, they said, hey, Cadet Hughes, you're not pushing the button during this hearing test. You're not going to be a sort of full-time pilot. I was like, whoa, that's all I've thought about was flying planes my whole life. And so I could have gone through the waiver route, but I chose not to. And the Air Force at the time was commissioning, this was sort of pre 9/11 and pre any of the conflicts we've been in, but was commissioning too many folks. They let people go directly to the reserves. So I'm from the DC area. I'm based in Northern Virginia right now. And I joined the Maryland Air National Guard when I graduated from UVA as sort of a part-time reserve officer, and got a full-time job at Lockheed Martin as a software engineer. So I give those two data points because I've had sort of the dual career track, and it's sort of helped me go between sort of technical roles, managerial roles, leadership roles, what have you. Now, the fortuitous side of doing my Air Force service in Maryland was the proximity to the National Security Agency, for folks that know the mission of that government organization. And again, at the time, 25 years ago, it sort of wasn't called cybersecurity, but the sort of broader signal intelligence mission exposed sort of me to network defense and network concepts. And then on my commercial job side, I was a software engineer, writing Java, C++ way back in the day. So again, I didn't have sort of a natural like indoctrination right into a field called cybersecurity right out of college. But I think the principles of writing code and sort of understanding the signals intelligence mission manifests itself as my career progressed into what is now called cybersecurity. I think it was beneficial to have like that foundational technical knowledge. Has certainly served me well as I've gotten into more senior positions. So I think as Dana mentioned, I'm the Chief Information Security Officer at Albertsons Companies. Most of you are on the East Coast, so you might not know like Albertsons proper, but we've got about 2,300 grocery stores across the country and are the second largest behind Kroger, with the caveat that you can't count Walmart. Like Walmart would dwarf everybody from a grocery store perspective. Also spent time at Capital One, which is, I'll put a quick plug because I have a tremendous amount of affinity for my former colleagues at Capital One. We were able to create a cybersecurity technical development program before I left, which is basically a rotational program where you do a number of stops in various teams inside of Capital One's cyber organization, sort of before you need to land on sort of your permanent role. Capital One for a long time has had what they broadly call their technology development program, TDP, but we created sort of a cybersecurity specific one, which I would encourage students to look into. I also did a stint investing in cyber companies, which was also good to sort of see how entrepreneurs were solving hard problems in cyber. And again, as an investor, it sort of gave me some experience in sort of assessing different vendor solutions, which as a CISO now, I'm sort of inundated with vendors that are looking to sell into big enterprise. And I'll say the best job I had in my career, I served in the Obama administration as the Assistant Secretary for Cyber Policy from the end of 14 through 17. And so you think about the bad things that were happening in cyber then. There was the sort of North Korean Sony incident. There was Russian influence in the 2016 election and a whole bunch of Chinese activity in our sort of security clearance system. So really hard problems there, more from like a policy and strategy standpoint, as opposed to like technical challenges, but it's still just a tremendous 2 years or so in government. Pleased to be here today. Look forward to questions.
Thanks so much. All right, we'll round it out with Crystal.
Hi, everyone. I'm Crystal Rowe. I like Aaron and Malike. I'm not a my college career was a while ago, so I'm not too far behind Aaron, but I graduated in electrical engineering. I didn't have like, I guess, your traditional cybersecurity path. I'm not even sure what a traditional cybersecurity path looks like nowadays, but when I was in college, I did my mandatory programming classes and tried to understand computer architecture, and it just didn't really, I didn't really understand it that well. So I kind of stuck to electrical engineering because I liked hardware. I liked building things. I liked seeing like the circuits and seeing like the diodes turn on and off, and that was kind of more my thing. But I also enjoyed a lot of the systems engineering classes too. So I I loved understanding how systems work and how they interconnected with each other. I just didn't think a career in computer science was for me, but I went down but I did want to stay technical. So when I graduated, I got a job with the Department of Defense. And this was just a couple of weeks before 9/11 happened. So you can imagine that time frame where everything's kind of chaotic, and there was a lot of opportunity to kind of learn on the technical side. So the first several years of my career there, I was looking at communication systems and designing them and learning how to build them to support the warfighter, especially in their counterterrorism efforts. And then I kind of got to a point where I would say like probably about 6 or 7 years in, some of my mentors were telling me like, look, there's this thing called cyber. It's growing. It's kind of where the opportunities are and where the mission is going. And I kind of like, oh yeah, all right, that's great. But I started to kind of poke around a little bit, ask questions, and then I wanted to understand like what it really meant. And then I tried a couple times to kind of get into the field, but it was hard at the time for me because I didn't have a good solid understanding of computers. So I joined a technical development program, and I really honed in and focused on the different aspects of cyber. So I learned about networking, and I learned about data analytics. I finally picked up programming again, which was something I swore I would never do. But I did it because I wanted to enable myself in understanding how to work with data and how to connect them together to create the story and understand what was going on. And so I did this for 4 years, and then I just kind of fell in love with it. I had found my niche, and it was mainly around looking at data at large scales and developing analytics and understanding where vulnerabilities were, and from a defensive perspective, and trying to understand how we would defend ourselves against all the various different type of attackers. I also did some work around like the offensive side, so understanding what to look for. And then at some point in my career, I just kind of felt like I wanted to kind of explore things beyond the government. So I left the government and I went to a few cyber startup companies, and I consulted with various companies who were trying to build their cyber programs. And I just realized that there was a lot of work to be done in this area. Eventually, I made my way over to Morgan Stanley, and they were trying to develop a threat hunting team. So I joined that, and it was a great 3 years that when I was there, we were developing analytics and looking at our own internal network to see, what vulnerabilities were there, or could we identify if an attacker was on the network, things like that. So we developed the analytics to kind of look at things from to defend it better, but from an offensive, but looking through the lens of from the offensive perspective. And then one of my friends and mentors called me up one day and said, "Hey, I work for this company called Blue Voyant. We're looking at risks within a company's supply chain, and I think it'd be a really great fit if you're looking for a new opportunity." So I decided to leave Morgan Stanley and joined Blue Voyant, which is it's at the time it was kind of like considered a startup, and now I think we've matured. We've got over 400 people in the company, so I don't think of it as a little startup anymore. But I lead one of the analytic teams, and what we do is we help companies understand the risks to their supply chain by assessing their vendors' external attack surface. So we build the analytics to discover the digital footprint for each company, and then look at the vulnerabilities and hygiene issues, and see if there's evidence of compromise. And we create these findings, prioritize them, and work with the vendors to mitigate these risks. And we do it at scale in an automated way. So that's kind of where I am today.
Great. Thanks so much. Those are all so different, such different career paths. So I think that's great for students to hear that there's not necessarily a career path that's the one right way to do it. All right, so I think we'll start with some questions that we have prepared that our panelists will ask, but I also would encourage anyone who has their own questions to put those in the chat, and we'll see how many of those we can get to as well. So I'm going to turn it over to our moderators, and we'll start with Connie.
Hi guys, can you guys hear me from here? Okay.
Yep.
So we've talked a little bit about your experiences in cybersecurity, and I was wondering if we could start out with what you guys define as cybersecurity. Anyone can feel free to start.
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, I think it's like the articulation of risk, right? I mean, certainly there's some more like technical components, but if someone were to ask me, how I would describe sort of being a CISO and being accountable for cybersecurity at a company, it's like really about managing risk. Now, some of that is technical risk, some of that is like process risk or human capital risk, but at the end of the day, we're charged with protecting customer information and corporate information day in and day out.
I think I think information security and cybersecurity are slightly different terms, but there's this definition that usually goes with information security, but refers to protecting, essentially, act of ensuring confidentiality, availability, and integrity of data. So it's not just protecting something against unauthorized access, but it also means making sure that the data is there, it's not modified, it's not deleted, and also making sure that it is available. So protecting it against denial of service attacks and things like that. And so I think cybersecurity is a very broad term. You can go, you can approach it from a technical perspective, you can approach it from a non-technical perspective. And I think that also speaks to about how many opportunities there are for you as students potentially interested in a career in cybersecurity.
So I think Erin said it very well, and especially as a risk professional, the way I see cybersecurity is risk management. It's managing the risk in the cloud. Now that we're all getting rid of legacy systems and moving to cloud, it's managing the risk in the company, or of your supplier network, or you call that the third-party ecosystem, and as well as your global risk. So it's a live concept, and I presented at another conference, and I said that as well in there. It's like hustling. So we manage risk. It's a utopic thing to say, you can fully mitigate risk and cybersecurity is established and you're done. It's really not that. There are so many variables to consider. The threat landscape, the regulatory landscape. There's this modern attack surface that keeps evolving, and it changed with the digitalization, and it also changed again with the ramifications of the pandemic, right? So I see cybersecurity also that it means resiliency. So adaptation to the adversaries, either via reactive measures or strategic things like proactive measures. And how quickly can you store and recover after a breach or an attack? It's just a question that you're always asked. And as a CISO, it's just like one question that's like people don't necessarily care what controls you have. What they care is like, oh, okay, is my data safe? Are you going to be able to recover the business? This is like, what do you really care about? So it's really a journey. I think that's you just need to live it smart and be prepared with the understanding that you may fail, but can you fail with the least impact? So how can you fail with the least impact? So it's really like how you live your life. You kind of keep hustling. You gotta keep doing what you do with your life, and it's a living concept in my opinion.
Also, just quickly, this is Francis. We do have a question in the chat. Do we want to stop and sort of answer the questions or continue on? What's best for the panel?
Let's wait, let's hold the questions in the chat until the end, because we might get to some of this with our plan.
Sounds great.
Yeah, I'll just tag on just a little bit of, in addition to what Aaron and Roman and Milike were saying, like a lot of it is about managing the risk to your company and also protecting your consumers. I like to think of it as like, how do you see your attack surface, or how does an attacker see your attack surface, and what are the vulnerabilities there? But also, how do you align your defenses to protect yourselves against the current threats and the future threats too? So when you talk about the alignment of your defenses, it comes at all levels. It's within your policies, your business operations, the people that you employ, the training that you give to every employee, and how do they all fit into the cybersecurity plan? Like everybody works in cybersecurity, whether you realize it or not. Every employee is part of that. So that's just all I wanted to add to that.
So when you guys were here at UVA, did you have any experiences, classes, or clubs that you were a part of that you think really benefited you in your cyber careers?
I'm just gonna say, back in my day, the internet was just starting to grow, so there wasn't really much for me to to dig into. That would have prepared me for a career in cybersecurity. I realize today now that's a lot different, but all the things I learned on the job when I was in the government. So.
Yeah, even when I joined UVA just a few years ago, there wasn't really a cybersecurity program there yet. And so my friends and I almost had to find, things to do to get better at cybersecurity. So we participate in competitions. We talked to professors. We, went to different conferences. And I think all of those experiences really helped us get some, hands-on practice in cybersecurity, which I think, especially if you're trying to pursue a technical role, is extremely important. So then we, helped organize CNS, and the fact that you're, attending this conference, when working with CNS, I think it's a really big step in that direction. But I also, being part of CNS lets you gives you some additional access to some technical resources like servers and labs that you can use for additional hands-on practice. And I think that's very useful. And our team is organizing Capture the Flag competition in December, and so our first few public events were at UVA. We moved to a virtual event recently, but would love to have you all join and participate.
So I'll give my my old man yells at cloud moment here real quick, because I think regardless of how technically astute anyone is, the one thing that is sort of lost sometimes I see from engineers I lead is still the ability to communicate, both in how you give a presentation and how you can write a pithy summary of something that a leader needs to digest very quickly. I can sort of translate this to the operational context, in a time of crisis. So say I've got a security operations center, they have those in the government. Most companies have some capability to sort of monitor, network, alert on events. I need my operational lead in that capacity to be able to sort of tell me in a very quick fashion, sort of what's the issue, what's our exposure, and what we're going to do about it, either in a short email or verbally to me or other technology leaders at the company. And you wouldn't believe how sort of hard it is sometimes for me to coach sort of that ability to sort of communicate to engineers I work with. So maybe that's a pivot from the question a little bit about what stuff I got involved with at UVA, but to Crystal's point, there was sort of no clubs back in the day that were associated with this, but a skill that like will never serve you wrong is the ability to communicate both verbally and written. So please take that to heart, incredibly important.
So I have kind of a two-part question. So the first part is, in the next few years, what threats do we really have to worry about? And the second part is, how can we act now to protect ourselves against those threats?
I can take a stab at it. So this is kind of, that's why it's risk is emerging risk, right? You don't necessarily know what it is. And I can't tell you if it's a next 2 years thing, but I would tell you that with automation and introducing machine learning and artificial intelligence, one thing is that consumers are basically increasingly gaining awareness around privacy rights. And there's also disinformation campaigns that are happening as well. So there are definitely, like, we start relying on data. We start relying on bias that may lead to discrimination, prejudice around security threats, loss of opportunities or wasted resources. So it's I can tell you one thing that I keep looking into is like the promises that the companies give or the nations give versus what they deliver on. And when I think about emerging risk, I think about, okay, how are we actually, like, obviously there's the standard ones, right? You think about application security, you think about data security, you think about resiliency. Those are all like standard things that every organization basically reports on their security posture. But one of the things, especially if you have PII, which is personally identifiable information, there's that privacy, just like the CIA triangle you have in security. Privacy has its own areas that focuses on ethics, that focuses on, can you really associate with these people? Can you really look into the data and make predictions that may actually introduce bias to the systems? So one of the things that I can tell you that we try to pay attention to, and that's because I work at a consumer-based business. But even then, when I was in Freddie Mac, we had that thought process that, okay, what are the privacy implications? Like we would perform privacy impact assessments to determine, is this a critical system, and then are we actually aligned with our privacy policy? So one thing that I would definitely think about is that introduction of that, after the introduction of that risk, us heavily relying on machine learning, are we really delivering on the promise? Are we really doing the right thing that we say? So that's definitely one area that, in addition to other areas that I'm sure the other speakers will speak about, but that, and also, our digital prints are all over the place. Like, how are they protected? Who needs to protect that? Do I actually give my consent to it? So all these areas, and I think and I don't know if any of you have heard of this. This is a new term out there that talks about privacy as a service. So how you have infrastructure as a service, like AWS does, software as a service. Then there's this demand that comes from the consumers, like privacy as a service. And one thing that I just want you to be aware of, like, it's your data, and you have to make sure it's protected, and you have to make sure that it's not used without your consent. And you're not influenced by this campaigns or information usage, your information being used, and your opinion is actually influenced based on what actually happened, also that we've seen in certain campaigns that had happened. So I would think that one emerging risk definitely is privacy, and how we actually, as security professionals, enable and influence privacy risk. That's, I think, is an area that we definitely need to pay attention to.
Well, another one of the as a service that should be added to the list is like, hacking or ransomware as a service, right? Like all the frameworks to exploit computers have basically been commoditized. It's like very point and click, or, pay very low fee to sort of leverage some service to exploit known vulnerabilities out there. If like the original premise of the question is like, what threats are we worried about? It's just like the fact that we still are in an environment where there's so much sort of unpatched infrastructure that, causing disruption is literally just like a point and click away. Now, if the question is like, what as students can you do about it, then maybe I would sort of answer it a little bit different. I shared this in the panel last week, like you really shouldn't be reusing passwords. That really can get folks in trouble, given sort of how much credential spillage there's been, and how easy it is for folks to sort of aggregate those and spray passwords at different sites where you've reused that. So certainly try to avoid or don't at all reuse any passwords. But if you think about, if your question is like the threats to worry about, is that exploiting systems out there is becoming, it usually sort of it was a very high bar for skill and complexity. Now it is an incredibly sort of low bar to cause disruption. And I think that's going to continue to be easier and easier to exploit in the future.
Yeah, to add to that, I think, just looking at the threats over the past 5 years, we're seeing like an increase in the skill level of the attackers, and even to the point where, Aaron was saying, like, it's ransomware is now a service, it's not that somebody has to learn all the intricacies of a system and then do the availability analysis and figure out how to attack it. Now they just pay somebody to do it for them, and then share the profits of that. So I think, we're going to start seeing, more and more of these attacks. Even in ransomware, they're not only are they demanding money because they've locked up a network, but they're also demanding money to not post sensitive information on the dark web or sell it. So, that's something, they've called as double extortion. Also, there's a lot of areas where I think, the industry hasn't been growing at the same rate as the attacks have been. So I think even a lot of the basic hygiene stuff that companies should be patching and just, putting basic cybersecurity defenses in place, we're still seeing that they're lagging behind, even though like the attacks are becoming more sophisticated. So I think that's something else to be concerned about. But also where they attack, we're starting to see critical infrastructure being attacked more. I mean, even to the point where I think I don't remember if it was earlier when it was this year, but like a Florida water plant, somebody attacked that, and they were changing the chemical levels, and so that could lead to poisoning an entire population. So I think we're just starting to see the different types of attacks, and I think it might get. I'm actually kind of concerned about like how far an attacker is willing to go in that space.
Yeah, I think I was going to bring up very similar things. The number of attacks has definitely increased. In the past, security analysts could look at logs and manually find traces of malicious activity, manually push patches to certain machines in the network. But now when you have to deal with thousands or millions of endpoints or computers at the same time, it's very difficult for humans to actually do it all by themselves. So they have to rely on technology and on automated tools. So I think that's a big kind of threat. And knowing your attack surface and knowing where you're vulnerable. I think as Krista mentioned, another thing is industrial control systems, industrial Internet of Things. People, I mean, even though one of the Stuxnet is really old and people know about that, but more recently there have been people usually associate cybersecurity with something that has purely digital repercussions. But more recently, with the Colonial Pipeline hack, and every once in a while you hear news stories about hospitals getting hacked and attack with ransomware, where life support systems are getting shut down, and so you see a lot of more of these physical repercussions stemming from these digital attacks. So I think that's another big threat. In terms of what you can do as students, I think it's important to familiarize yourself, especially in the computer science program. There are a lot of things that you learn in your programming classes. You learn different algorithms, you learn different tools, you learn different ways to implement things. But I think it's important to familiarize yourself even with like the most basic cybersecurity vulnerabilities. Back when I was at UVA, I actually worked for the information security department at UVA, and there were several apps that university used, in 2018, where you could log in. If you look at the source code of the website, you could simply log in, but with just a username. Your password didn't matter. for example, when UVA implemented two-factor authentication, I think in 2019 or 2018, when they first rolled it out, the application that lets you enable your two-factor key, it just didn't care about your password at all. You could enter your username, you could steal people's phone numbers, you could steal, it had a command injection vulnerability. And this is simply because the developer who made it had no idea that, that was a thing. As you're learning programming, make sure that you'll also think about how other, don't assume that the people who are going to be using your applications always have, good intentions. And you just familiarize yourself with basics of, cross-site scripting, SQL injection. Even though you hear about those things all the time, those are still extremely common. And don't treat security as something as you can just add on at the end. Make sure it's part of your development process throughout.
Awesome, thank you. So as students, we're really trying to get more hands-on experience, and a big part of that is through internships. Do you guys have any advice on how to get internships? Maybe if we aren't on a traditional CS path, how to get a cybersecurity internship, if that's still possible?
Erin, you can go if you'd like.
I was going to say, I mean, I know that, big companies are still certainly, hiring interns. I'll speak to my time at Capital One. We took sort of both traditional software engineering interns and folks for the cybersecurity department. Most of those were coordinated through on-campus career services department. Now, I think that's sort of likely true for most big companies. Now, for sort of the onesie twosie smaller companies that don't engage with like on-campus career services, think a little bit more legwork and networking, leverage like LinkedIn and other areas, either through relationships with alumni or sort of other friends and family that might be in companies of interest. Like every company, I shouldn't say every company, like majority of companies have some sort of cybersecurity department. And it's really about sort of figuring out if those departments are accepting interns, but certainly all the sort of big cos, financial services, retail, like we have internship programs.
I would say also attending events, like networking is obviously the thing. And when you're finding an internship, for me, my experience was actually through the career services and this was years ago, so I'm sure it's more robust right now. So definitely that. And I would say networking and making sure that you build a circle of friends, which is you can attend. So there are a lot of organizations. There are ISC Square. There is, if you're interested in privacy, IAPP. There is Women in Cybersecurity. I think there's a club at UVA as well. So there's so many organizations that you can actually be part of. OWASP actually does a lot of webinars, and don't be afraid to do this cold networking too, like linking somebody on LinkedIn saying, hey, I heard you present and I'm interested in hearing more. I really appreciated you pointing out this. I'd like to learn more about that. And can you give me some resources? I mean, I present in conferences and people reach out to me and I respond to them. And it's a good thing for me because sometimes people tell me things that I don't know and I learn from that too. So finding an internship, it's similar to finding a job, and it's really through networking. It's really through who you know. Sometimes people create positions for you based on your skills. So that's even itself, it's an opportunity for you to try. So and I know internships are sometimes paid, sometimes not paid. In my opinion, obviously everybody's situation and circumstances are different. Being curious and being flexible and open to different ways of doing things, knowing that you will leave that experience with new knowledge, new friends, new network, I think itself actually is a form of payment, in my opinion. So one thing I can tell you is, I know that I can't give you an area, just go there and apply, but LinkedIn job alerts, reaching out to people, that's itself one thing. Another thing is attend to conferences. A lot of them are actually are free for students. So for me, like a professional, I actually have to pay or I have to be invited. But for students, it's a different scenario. So definitely enhance your network and attend to these events and try to see what you can actually, who you can meet, because you don't know what you're going to find where.
Yeah, there are definitely opportunities out there, and there are opportunities for all skill levels and backgrounds. At my current company, we have interns that are technical, so we'll have them do some programming projects for us, like web scraping and stuff. And then there are some interns who are more geared towards threat intelligence and writing, and so they have maybe a geopolitical background or something. So there's something for everyone. When I was on the threat hunting team, we had a internship program. We only took 3 students at a time, but it was highly technical. So we had them pretty much build a network from scratch in our lab, and then use various types of malware and figure out how it worked, and then develop analytics to detect those types of attacks. So, I mean, it varies in what you're looking for and what you're interested in, but there are opportunities out there. I would just reiterate, there are a lot of great resources out there. Conferences are a great place to network. I like B-Sides, DerbyCon, Black Hat, DEF CON, more so DEF CON. Black Hat and DEF CON like kind of are back to back, but the talks there are interesting. They kind of provide new perspectives in the industry, and then they also go into technical details. So I would definitely like listen to those talks. I think they're online, so you can go to YouTube and look them up and find some topics that you like and learn about it. So I would definitely go in like with curiosity. I think curiosity's been probably like one of the things that I find is a strength in a lot of people when they're curious and they ask questions and then they try to figure out how things work. I think that served a lot of people well, especially in this field. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of things you can do if regardless of where your starting point is.
Yeah, and I already said it several times, but I think it is important to participate in competitions. And even if you're not looking for a technical role, there are plenty of competitions that are focused on policy, on other non-technical fields within cybersecurity. And even if you are not expecting to be first, or even if you place last, just the fact that you attended this competition and tried, I think it tells a lot about you. And a lot of the sponsors that attend those competitions, they're always looking for interns. And so once again, even if you place last, you'll still get to meet a lot of companies, a lot of recruiters who are desperate to find people. I mean, there's a huge demand for people, and if you know the right people, it can be relatively easy to find an internship. And there are some, I've encountered several really good online Discord communities where there are hundreds of companies posting job postings for where they're looking for interns or small part-time contractors. And if you reach out to me, I can give you a link. But I think it is important to be part of a community, where you maybe find yourself a mentor who can introduce you to some other people. And as one of the panelists mentioned, somebody might create a job for you based on your skills.
So do you guys have any advice for people who are trying to get started into cybersecurity, and any additional skills that they may want to focus on that you haven't already mentioned?
One thing I can think about is, and I know that from experience, which is preparing for certifications during school, because it gets harder when you start working to actually make the time to do that. And also your mind is already in this study mindset already. So it's really helpful. Then one, you will be able to network. Two, you'll understand how these theories or knowledge that you read in these books or study materials are actually applied in real life. So there are certifications. You may not qualify to actually have the certificate or certification given to you, but once you hit the job work experience requirement, you can actually have the certification as well, like next to your name. So one thing I would say, like ISECA offers certifications, ISC Square offers certifications. So it will be a good thing for you to actually learn and meet new people through that too. And I think it's for students, I think it's cheaper to actually get certified. So it gets more expensive also when you're in the professional field. And then the other thing, I saw a comment in the chat asking, my background is not computer science or IT. Can I be part of cybersecurity? One thing I learned in my career is that diversity actually makes cybersecurity actually about being able to do risk management portion. Like that's like being able to think differently, having different mindsets. So it's like having somebody who actually have psychology background or social science background. That brings that color to that whole table, and then you can actually think differently. Because us technical people, and I am oftentimes in conversations, because I manage risk and compliance and governance in the team, engineers that are a lot more technical than me. They're a lot more hands-on. But what I can tell you is that being able to understand each other and then communicate with each other is definitely a key thing to have. But then having the knowledge to kind of apply that, like understand different areas in the different domains of cybersecurity is another thing. But having a different background actually is an add-on. So do not let that scare you away from studying going into cybersecurity. Like I said, I come from a very non-traditional cybersecurity background. I did consultant, I did data analytics, and then I moved to cybersecurity through risk management, and I'm still doing risk management. So it's definitely that. But to summarize, definitely certifications, check those out. There's also 2 frameworks that NIST has great information. So applications of controls like NIST 853, NIST CSF cybersecurity framework. They just came up with the NIST privacy framework. These are also good things to actually have. So when you're preparing for an interview, for example, just to have certain understanding of how people actually approach when they think about organizational risk, how they think about securing an organization, reporting on security posture of an organization. So I would definitely look into those as well. But one thing, please, I'm begging you, don't think that you don't have the right background. There is no right background.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. So as a sort of hiring manager, I'm indifferent on degrees. I mean, certainly, if you think about and NIST is a great resource there, as like I mentioned, because it'll also sort of tell you the job families and types, if you look at the NICE framework there. But most big organizations will have some function that's dedicated to sort of operations and incident response, something related to security engineering, something related to governance, risk, and compliance. And then some organizations in the security team will also be responsible for identity and access management. And like there's so many different backgrounds. You can have some folks that are more analytic in nature, some folks that come from a programming background, some folks that are sort of generalist engineers. Like don't feel like you absolutely have to have a CS background to have a career in cybersecurity. I mean, I think just like a general analytic background and problem solving are key, but I think that's sort of true for sort of any engineering discipline. But if you think about the diversity of job functions and roles in cyber, there's not like one thing I can point to say you like absolutely have to have that. Except I'll come back to you, absolutely have to have the ability to communicate and absolutely have to have the ability to problem solve. But I think you can get that from a number of academic pursuits.
I think we may have time for one more question.
Do we want to do you want us to ask one more, or should we open it up to everyone else?
Well, let's look in, we can maybe pick one from the chat that we haven't answered yet or hasn't been addressed yet. I think we touched on a lot of those things.
While you're looking for the next question, I will put in a plug to reiterate communication is probably the #1 thing, that skill that somebody can have regardless of where your career field is. Problem solving obviously is very important. And again, your background really doesn't matter, but I think something that has helped me a lot and what I usually recommend is understanding networks and how the basic components are, like what a DNS server is, what firewalls are, and just how these pieces come together And because a lot of times when you're working for a company, whether you're at a high level and you're trying to articulate the risks, or if you're at a deeper technical level, being able to say like, this is where the risks are. This is the impact to our organization and our operations. This is how we mitigate those. Like just being able to communicate those three to answer those three questions can be a challenge for any company.
Maybe we'll wrap up with just, if anyone has, since we're getting close to time, if any of you have just a little bit of advice for students, as they are considering this as a career option, maybe something that you wish someone had told you when you were in their shoes.
I mean, we've been talking about this, and I'll just try to summarize what I heard as the buzzwords of this conversation was curiosity, networking, and I'll say this, like, don't let other people's opinion of what you studied affect your future opportunities. And then I just want to tell you a little bit about like how I spend my day, and what actually really, I would say, besides what I have studied, besides what all my certifications, besides all the things that my mentors, my colleagues taught me, it really has been about building relationships. And it's really about this long-term gaining trust, so that you seek to understand them, they seek to understand you, and then you actually realize you're after the same goal for the better of the organization. That's very important, and I cannot emphasize that enough. And I would say, to prepare for that, meet as many as people you can, join as many as clubs you can, brainstorm. I mean, sometimes, we all have this thing, it's just you don't think like me, or you're not understanding what I'm saying, so I'm going to talk to somebody who understands what I'm saying or who thinks similarly to me. Having people around you who think differently actually is a way of getting to success. Because I learned that by experience. It's really, sometimes you just hear things and it's more comfortable to hear things that you want to hear. But sometimes, especially when you're thinking about the threat landscape, attack surface, all these buzzwords, you actually want to have that diversity. And it's really important you seek that mentality around seeking to understand, listening a lot, brainstorming. Some people call it arguing. I didn't grow up here, so for me it's like a lot of for me it's brainstorming, and some people think of it as arguing. I don't think so. I think I want to hear what you think because I value what you think. That's how I look at it. So you have a tremendous opportunity of people around you, and in school it's so much easier. So just expose yourself to that, and just meet people. And if any of you have questions, feel free to reach out to me as well. But being open-minded, being curious, and just like exposing yourself to new things and different ideas is really important, in my opinion.
Yeah, I will second the investing in your network. I don't like this phrase, but I will say it, like, networking is better than not working. But it's not my favorite phrase. I think my favorite phrase is with relationships, especially your professional one, or well, actually in any of your relationships, invest early and invest often. So, and that'll grow over time. I think a lot of people, will do the cursory, hey, I, DM you on LinkedIn or do a Zoom call here and there. But like, I think the teams that I've worked on, the ones that have been very successful and they're pretty close and tight knit, and it's because they invest in each other. So while you wherever you go, definitely don't just work and don't just focus on work. Invest in the people around you, and they'll do the same.
Yeah, I'll repeat the same thing. Relationships, building relationships can be very helpful. Your first task could be to reach out to one of the panelists. I'm open to connecting with you all and having additional conversations. But yeah, I think the main reason I am where I am right now is because of all the people that I knew back when I was in high school. Just because I knew some people who worked at a company, I was able to go to conferences for free. I was able to travel to different places, because they would invite me, and I would show curiosity, I would be interested in things, and they would just bring me along and introduce me to their project. And yeah, finding a good mentor can also be very helpful.
All right, well, we're right at time, so I think we'll wrap it up there. I did want to thank our moderators so much. It was great to have student participation from our Women in Cybersecurity Club and from the CNS Club here. And the panelists, this was just excellent information. And I know I learned a lot. I'm sure the students learned a lot too. And just, we really appreciate and are grateful for having such wonderful alums that will come back and share their advice and what they've learned along the way. I think that's one of the things that makes UVA a special place, is the wonderful alumni network that we have, and we really appreciate your willingness to meet with us tonight. So I wanted to thank everyone for being here, and hopefully we will see we'd love to see the panelists back on ground sometime soon when we can do that. So thank you again, and have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity.